Hey there, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining me on my channel, The Magical Solution. We are live on Twitch, on YouTube, and on TikTok and my private Facebook group, which is The Magical Solution. This is how we grow. If you want to join my private Facebook group, head on over there, answer the 3 questions, and you are in. We are continuing with the Mediums book. I know that I've been away. I know I haven't done one of these lives in a good hot minute. But you know what? All that means is that hopefully all of you guys have gotten an opportunity to go to my YouTube channel and rewatch all of the previous chapters. And that means now you're all caught up, right? Okay, that's what that means. So I don't feel so bad for leaving you. But here we are. We are in part 2 of the Mediums book, and we are on chapter 6. And the chapter is called The Explanation of the Physical Manifestations. The subcategories within this chapter, the topics that we're going to be covering are movements and suspensions and noises, increase and decrease in the weight of objects. So again, I'm going to talk about the Allan Kardec books just briefly. We went through the Spirits book, which was it was very much about the metaphysics and the metasciences of the spirit world and the makeup of the spiritual body and the spiritual fluids. And this book is going to be a little bit different. This is more so about how these spirits interact within our world and how we as mediums can perceive these energies. So if you haven't already read the Spirits book, by all means, head back to my YouTube channel. Let's get to it, you guys. And thank you, TikTok. I appreciate you. So here we go. Movements and suspensions and noises. Having used both reasoning and phenomenon to demonstrate the existence of spirits along with the possibility of their being able to act upon matter, we must now determine how their actions are produced and how they operate in order to move tables and inert objects. One idea that naturally occurred is the one that we held for a while. However, the spirits contested it and provided us with a completely different explanation. One we did not anticipate at all, and moreover, it is obvious that their explanation did not originate with us. Our original idea could have quite possibly been held by others as well. As for the spirit's explanations, we do not believe that it could have ever occurred to anyone else. It is certainly easy to see how much more superior it is than our own, although it is also simpler because it offers a solution to numerous other incidents that had no satisfactory explanation. Number 73. Knowledge of the nature of spirits, their human form, the semi-material properties of their perispirit, the mechanical action they can exert upon matter, and the occurrence of apparitions of fluidic and even tangible hands that could lift objects and carry them naturally led to our belief that a spirit simply used its hands in order to turn a table and that it lifted it by using its arms. But if there were so, then what was the need for mediums? Couldn't the spirit act by itself? Since mediums often rested their hands upon a table in a position contrary to its movement, or did not even place their hands upon it at all, they obviously could not aid the spirit with any muscular movement. So let us first see what the spirits whom we asked had to say about this matter. Now, mind you, I'm reading this from the perspective that Allan Kardec has done a series of experiments where he's trying to test how these spirits are able to move inert objects and how mediums in the same space as these spirits may or may not have influenced those movements, right? And so he's doing these experiments, and now we're approaching a point where he wants to ask the spirits directly, like, How the F do you do this, right? So here we are, number 74. The following responses were given by the Spirit St. Louis and were later confirmed by others. Number 1, is the universal fluid an emanation of the divinity? The answer, no. Number 2, is it a creation of the divinity? The answer, everything has been created except God. Number 3, is the universal fluid the universal element itself? The answer, yes. It is the elementary principle of all things. Number 4, does it have any relation to the electric fluid whose effects we are very familiar with? The answer, it is its element. Number 5, how is the universal fluid displayed to us in its simplest form? The answer, to find it in its absolute simplest form, one would have to ascend toward the pure spirits. In your world, however, it is always modified to varying degrees in order to form the dense matter all around you. Nevertheless, you could say that it is closest to its simplest form in the fluid known as the magnetic animalized fluid. Did y'all hear that? The magnetic animalized fluid. That is the simplest and most comparable form that the Spirit can describe this spiritual fluid that he's talking about. Number 6. It has been stated that the universal fluid is the source of all life. It is at the same time the source of all intelligence? The answer? No. This particular fluid merely animates the matter. Question number 7. Since it is the fluid that forms the perispirit, it seems that it undergoes a kind of condensation, which, to a certain point, approaches matter per se. And the answer is, as you say, to a certain point, because it does not possess all the properties of matter per se, and its condensation is greater or lesser according to the nature of the various worlds. So again, when we talk about that with regards to the spirit book, he talks about the different worlds that these spirits inhabit, that earth isn't just the only place that spirits reside. And so he's talking here also that this universal fluid that animates matter changes based on the world that it's on. So it's not going to act the same way in every single world. Question number 8. So how does a spirit move a solid object? The answer, it combines a portion of the universal fluid with the fluid emitted by the medium in order to move it. That must have threw y'all for a loop, because I remember first reading this and saying to myself, so they're using us? They're using us. They're using our fluids, they're using our energy to be able to move objects. Like, it's not just 100% them. And, when I used to teach spirits and how spirits function in the world, you know, it, for example, like when people go ghost hunting, um, oftentimes you'll see the mediums in the group, or even just the regular people in the group, they might get lightheaded, their blood pressure might drop, their sugar level might drop, they might get wheezy or want to pass out, and they get pale and kind of sickly. And that's usually around the time when the electrical stuff is acting funny or when something moves across the room. And it just goes to show that it isn't just the spirit doing it, but they're kind of pulling in and sucking in the energies of the living people that are in that space. Question number 9. Do spirits lift tables using their arms, which have become solidified somehow? And the answer? The answer to that question will not tell you what you want to know. When a table moves underneath your hand, it is because the spirit has been evoked, has taken enough of the universal fluid to infuse the table with artificial life. Having prepared the table in this way, the spirit attracts it and moves it under the influence of its own fluid, which it emits by exerting its own will. When the object that it wants to move is too heavy for it, it asks for help of the other spirits who possess similar characteristics. Because of this ethereal nature, the spirit in and of itself cannot act upon dense matter without some kind of intermediary, and that is, without the link that connects it to matter. This link is what you call the perispirit, and it provides the key to all physical spirit phenomena. I believe I have explained the matter clearly enough to have made myself understood. We would call attention to the sentence. The answer to that question will not yet tell you what you want to know. Abbreviating the word yet, okay? This spirit understood perfectly well that all the preceding questions had the sole purpose of leading up to question 9. He was referring to our thought, wherein we had in fact anticipated a different response, i.e., one that would confirm our own idea about the way spirits move tables. Let's move on to question 10. Are the spirits whom it calls upon to help of a less evolved nature? Are they under its orders? The answer? They're almost always its equals and come spontaneously. Question 11. Are all spirits able to produce phenomenon of this kind? The answer? The spirits who produce them are always of a less evolved nature, and that is not yet entirely free of material influences. Number 12. We can understand that highly evolved spirits do not concern themselves with matters that are well below them, but we would like to know if they would have the ability to do so if they wanted to, since they are more dematerialized. So, he's really trying to figure out, like, are lower vibrational energies the only ones able to move objects because they are still connected to their dense matter? They're still connected to these lower vibrational objects and living things. Um, and if so, what about higher frequency spirits? Like, if our angels, or if spirits who have ascended, like ascended masters and stuff, if they wanted to intercede in our life, if they wanted to save us from a car crash, if they wanted to do whatever, are they able to, because they are now ascendant and dematerialized so much more and so much more distanced away from the lower vibrational material world? Like, do they even have that ability? You know what I mean? Like, that's the question they're trying to ask. And the answer is they possess mental power, as the others possess physical power. When they have need of the latter, they employ those spirits who have it. Haven't we already stated that they use lower order spirits in the same way that you employ porters? So, in a nutshell, he's saying, no, they use their mental stuff. Like, if they want to move shit, they'll just go get one of these lower vibrational spirits and have them move it on their behalf. We have already stated that the density of the perispirit is if one may so, varies according to the nature of the various worlds. It also seems to vary on the same world according to different individuals. In morally advanced spirits, it is sublet and comes close to the perispirit of high order entities. On the other hand, in low order spirits, it is closer to matter, and this is what causes the persistence of the illusions of earthly life in such spirits, who think that they can act as if they were still physically alive, possessing the same desires, and we could almost say the same sensuality. This density of the perispirit, which leads it, A greater affinity to matter is what enables low order spirits to be more skillful at physical manifestations. It is similar to why a refined person with a fragile, delicate body and who is used to intellectual endeavors cannot lift heavy loads like Porter can. The matter of his or her body is somewhat less compact. The organs are less resilient, and the neural fluid is less intense. The perispirit is for the spirit what the body is for the individual. Its density results from the less purified nature of the spirit. Hence, this density replaces muscular strength, i.e., it gives greater power over the fluids needed for this type of manifestation than a spirit of a more ethereal nature possesses. If a more evolved spirit wants to produce such effects, it does what frail persons among us do. It employs a spirit of the trade. Question 13. If we correctly understood what you have said, the vital principle lies in the universal fluid. The spirit draws the semi-material envelope that comprises its perispirit from this fluid, and it is through this fluid that it acts upon inert matter. Is this so? The answer? Yes. It means that it animates matter with a sort of artificial life. Matter becomes infused with animal life. The table that moves under your hands is alive with animal-like life and obeys the intelligent being itself. The spirit itself does not push the table as if it were some kind of physical load. And when the table raises into the air, the spirit is not lifting it with its arms. Instead, the animated table obeys the impulses given to it by the spirit. Now, here is where it gets super interesting, because if a perispirit, who's lower vibrational and therefore closer to the physical realm, can move objects by simply animating those objects and then commanding the animation of those objects, why can't we? Why can't we? If we are the stewards of this earth, if we are alive and we know that we can animate an object and then command that animation, obviously, because they can, and we're also spirits that encapsulate a perispirit within us, why can't we move objects? Right? I mean, that's like a mind twister. But who knows, maybe he'll answer that question or maybe not, and that can be something that you can practice at home. Question 14. What role does the medium play in this phenomenon? The answer? I have already said that the medium's own fluid is combined with the universal fluid accumulated by the spirit. The uniting of both the animalized and the universal fluids is required in order to endow the table with life. However, you must not forget that this life is only momentary. It stops with the cessation of the fluid's action and often before the process is fully completed, as soon as the amount of the fluids is no longer sufficient to animate the table. Question 15. Can a spirit act without resorting to a medium? The answer? It can act without the medium being aware of it. In other words, many persons help spirits to produce certain phenomena without even suspecting it. These persons are like fountains from which spirit draws the animal fluid that they need. Consequently, conscious participation of a medium, as you know, is not always necessary, especially with spontaneous phenomenon. Question 16. Does the animated table act with intelligence? Like, does it think? Does the table think? The answer? The object itself does not think. It is like a walking stick that you might use to make an intelligent signal to someone. The vitality that animates it enables it to obey the impulses of the intelligence behind it. You should realize that the moving table does not become a spirit, it has neither thought nor will. We frequently use a similar expression in everyday language concerning a wheel that is spinning rapidly. We say that it is animated by a rapid movement. Question 17. What is the preponderant cause in the production of this phenomenon? Is it the spirit itself or the fluid? The spirit is the cause and the fluid is the instrument. Both are required. Question 18. In this case, what role does the medium's will play? The answer: to call upon the spirits and to aid them in giving impulse to the fluid. It's the medium's will always indispensable? It increases the potency, but it is not always necessary. Since a movement may occur in spite of or contrary to the medium's will, further proof for the existence of an independent cause. It is not always even necessary for the hands to come in contact with the object in order for it to move. Almost always, all that they are needed for is to provide the initial impulse. But after that, the object has been animated, it can obey the will without any physical contact. Of course, this depends on the power of the medium or the nature of the spirits involved. Moreover, even the first contact is not always needed. We have proof of this in the spontaneous movements and dislocations that no one even thought about causing. And what he means by that is in previous chapters, they have done experiments where there were several mediums in the group, and they were trying to make something happen, and something else entirely happened. None of them even thought about happening. And so to him, that's proof that the spirits don't even need that initial intent, that they can make things happen that we weren't even expecting. Question 19. Why can't everyone produce the same effects? And why don't all mediums possess the same power? The answer: it depends on physical composition and the greater or lesser ease in combining the fluids. I'm going to just say that again. It depends on the physical composition and the greater or lesser ease of the fluids. Physical composition. He's literally talking about your health and your physical body and its capacity to be a generator for energy and for spirit and for the spiritual fluids. If your body is not a healthy generator of this, you're kind of like an medium. You know what I mean? It further depends on the greater or lesser affinity the medium and the spirits who find in the medium the required fluidic potency. As is the case with magnetizers, this potency is either little or great. In this regard, we have found individuals who are completely resistant to the process, others in which the combining of the fluids only occurs because they exert their own will, and finally, others in which it occurs so naturally and easily that they're not even aware of it, where they serve as unknowing instruments, as we have just stated. There is no doubt that magnetism is the principle behind this phenomenon, but not as is generally supposed. We have proof of this in the existence of powerful magnetizers who cannot even move a small table, while there are individuals, even children, who do not know how to magnetize at all and who merely have to place their fingers upon a heavy table in order for it to shake. Thus, if mediumistic power does not depend on magnetic power, it must have some other cause. Question 20. Can those called electricals be regarded as mediums? The answer. Such individuals draw from within themselves the fluid required for producing the phenomenon, and they can act without the aid of spirits. They are not mediums per se in the precise meaning of the word. It might happen with a spirit that a spirit will assist them and take advantage of their natural abilities, however. Such individuals are like somnambulists who can act with or without spirits helping them. And the word somnambulist can be found in the spirits book. I know those of you guys who made fun of me when we were reading the spirits book because I had no idea how to pronounce it. But yes, that word is in the spirits book. Question 21. When they act upon solid objects, do spirits penetrate their substance or do they remain outside of it? The answer? They do both. We have already stated that matter is no obstacle to spirits, who can penetrate anything. A portion of their perispirit identifies itself, so to speak, with the object that it penetrates. Question 22. How does a spirit produce raps? Does it use a physical object? Now, when he's saying the word raps, he's meaning like, a tapping sound. Back in the Victorian ages and back in the age of like, Houdini and all that, when they used to do table tipping and the levitating of the table and all that stuff, right before that would happen, there'd usually be like tap on the table. Or mediums would sit in a circle and instead of using a Ouija board, they would do the counting of taps where, one tap is A, two taps is B, three taps is C, that kind of stuff. So he wants to know, how does a spirit produce those things? Does it use a physical object? Like, does he have something in the spirit world that he's like hitting upon physical matter? Like, how does this work? And the answer is no. Just as they do not use their arms to lift a table, you must realize that they do not have hammers at their disposal to produce raps. Instead, their hammer is the combined fluid that they put into action using their will to move objects or produce raps. When they move objects, light transmits the movement to your sight. When they produce raps, air transmits the sound to you. When they move objects, light transmits the movement to your sight. When they produce raps, air transmits the sound to you. So he's not saying anything outside of science. He's basically saying that these spirits are manipulating the natural elements, manipulating light so that you can see certain things, manipulating the air so you could hear certain things. And they're doing this by using the universal fluid and, of course, the energy of the mediums to be able to create these changes in the environment that then you perceive as messages. Crazy. Question number 23. We can understand this when dealing with a hard object, but how can a spirit make us hear noises or articulated sounds within the air alone? Answer. Since it can act upon matter, it can thus act upon air in the same way that it acts upon a table. As for articulating sounds, it can imitate them just like any other noise. I mean, yeah, why wouldn't they, right? Question 24. You have stated that a spirit does not use its hand to move a table, but during certain visual manifestations, hands have appeared that played keyboards, actually moving the keys and producing sounds. In this case, isn't the movement of the keys produced by the pressure of the fingers? And isn't the pressure of their fingers direct and real when we feel them touch us and when they even leave marks on our skin? And the answer is you cannot comprehend the nature of spirits and the way that they act by merely using comparisons, which provide only an incomplete idea of the matter. It is always a mistake to compare their manner of acting to yours. Spirits must always act in accordance with their organization. Haven't we stated that the perispirit's fluid penetrates matter and identifies with it, endowing it with artificial life? Well, then, when a spirit plays a keyboard with its fingers, it is really doing so. However, it does not use muscular force to press the keys. Instead, like the table, it animates the keyboard, which obeys its will and vibrates the strings. In cases such as this, something else happens that is hard for you to comprehend. Certain spirits are still so little evolved and so material in comparison with evolved spirits that they retain the illusions of earthly life and think that they can continue to act as they did when they were in a body. They do not perceive the true cause of the effect they produce, as a commoner does not understand the theory behind the sounds he or she pronounces. If you ask such spirits how they can play the piano, they will say that they use their fingers, since that is what they believe. They produce the effect instinctively without even knowing how. Nonetheless, they actually produce it by their will. Whenever they speak or make themselves heard, it is the same thing. Thus, we can understand that spirits can produce all the effects we ourselves can, but by means in keeping with their organization. They possess certain inner forces that replace our muscles, just as a person who cannot speak sign with their hands. So, in the spirit world, their muscles is a combination of the universal fluid, the spirit fluid of the medium, and the willpower of the spirit. These three things allow objects to move and appear to move in the same way that a human would, because the spirit itself is a lower vibrational spirit that is still connected to matter, and therefore their will to move something is a will that is very similar to the way a human would do it, because they're still connected to that person that they used to be when they were alive. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense to you guys. Question 25. Among the phenomenon cited as proofs for the action of a concealed power, there are those who obviously contrary to all the known laws of nature. Hence, isn't it correct to question them? The answer? It just so happens that humans are far from knowing about all the laws of nature. I love how this spirit answers these questions. Like, he's such a sassy spirit. You know what I mean? He's like, oh, yeah, because you fucking know everything. Okay, yeah. If they knew about them, it would imply that they were highly evolved spirits. Like, bitch, you don't know shit. Because if you did, you would have been evolved yourself out of this planet already. But you don't know shit. So stop it. However, every day there are incidences that disprove those who think they know everything and who intend to impose limits on nature. And yet they are no less proud of themselves at that fact. By constantly unveiling new mysteries, God warns people that they must distrust their own knowledge, because a day will come in which the knowledge of the most learned person will be confounded. Every day, don't you see examples of objects that are impelled by a motion that is capable of overcoming the power of gravity? Doesn't a ball thrown into the air momentarily overcome this force? Poor humans, who regard yourselves as being so learned and whose foolish vanity is confused at every turn, you must realize that you are still very small. Oh, the spirit done read you for filth. Oh. Number 75. The above explanations are clear, categorical, and unambiguous. From them, we may emphasize the crucial point that the universal fluid which harbors the principle of life is the chief agent in manifestations, and that this agent receives its impulses from the spirit, whether incarnate or discarnate. This condensed fluid comprises the perispirit or semi-material envelope of the spirit. When incarnate, the perispirit is connected to the matter of the body. In the errant state, it is free. While the spirit is incarnate, the substance of this perispirit is more or less bound, more or less adherent to it, if we may put it so. In certain individuals, there is a kind of emanation of this fluid as a result of particular conditions in their physical composition, which is, properly speaking, what produces physical effects in mediums. So, right now, he's talking a little bit about the aura, believe it or not. So, he's talking about how the perispirit can sometimes emanate outside of the body. And, in my private Facebook group, the Magical Solution, This Is How We Grow group, I did a whole class on this. I did a Zoom lesson about the aura and what its biology is made out of, and we talk a lot about this. The greater or lesser abundance of the emanation of this animalized fluid and the ease in which it combined determines the medium's power. The emanation is not permanent, however, which explains the intermittency of this ability. Number 76. Let us make a comparison. When we want to strike something that is some distance away, we first determine to do so with our thought. But thought alone cannot actualize our intent. We need an intermediary, which our thought will direct, like a stick, or a projectile, a blast of air, etc. Note, further, that our thought cannot act directly upon the stick, for if we do not touch it, it will not act by itself. So just keep that piece in mind, right? That's another element of it. Our thought, which is the spirit itself incarnated in our body, is united to the body by the perispirit and cannot act upon the body without it, in the same way that it cannot act upon the stick without the help of the body. Therefore, the spirit acts upon the perispirit, which is the substance with which it has the most affinity. Then the perispirit acts upon the muscles, which in turn enables the hand to pick up the stick and the stick to then strike the target. When the spirit is not incarnate, it requires an instrument, the fluid that aids it in making the object carry out the impulse of its will. Okay? So this also explains how mounting and possession works as well. Because what it's saying here is that a spirit, that an external, well, what it implies, not what it's saying, what it implies is, at least with regards to possession and mounting, is that an external spirit can come into the body, displace, the spirit that's here, and work with the perispirit to then animate the muscles and make the body do what it wants it to do at the will of the spirit. Does that make sense? And this is why when people come out of possession, they don't remember anything, because it wasn't their spirit doing that. It was the spirit of something else doing that was animating their body for them. Okay? Number 77. Let me just make sure I'm on track here. I don't want to lose track of time. Okay. Number 77. Therefore, when an object is moved, lifted, or thrown through the air, the spirit does not take a hold of it or lift it or throw it as we do with our hands. It saturates it, so to speak, with its fluid, combined with the medium's fluid. Momentarily animated thereby, the object acts like a living being, with the difference that it does not have a will of its own, but instead obeys the impulse of the spirit's will. Thus, the vital fluid impelled by the spirit endows inert objects with artificial momentary life. Since the perispirit is nothing other than this vital fluid itself, it follows that the incarnate spirit, by means of its perispirit, is what gives life to its own body, and it stays united to it as long as the organization enables it so. When the spirit withdraws, the body dies. So, if instead of a table, we look at a wooden statue and acted upon it like we did upon the table, We would have a statue that would move about and produce raps in responses to our questions. In other words, we would have a statue that was momentarily animated with artificial life. Besides talking tables, we would also have talking statues. How much light this explanation casts over an infinite number of phenomenon heretofore inexplicable. How many allegories and mysteries, effects it resolves. So what he's talking about here is those moments throughout history when like inanimate objects start moving and like statues start moving and these miracles occur, the statues of Mother Mary crying blood and all this other stuff. What he's saying is that these spirits can have an effect on these inanimate objects and create seeming miracles and create situations that can create mass hysteria. But what he's saying is there's a reasonable explanation for that. The spirits can do those kinds of things. Number 78. You know what? I'm going to take a sip of water. Those of you guys who want to take 2 minutes and take a sip of water, let's do so. So good. Okay. In spite of all the evidence, disbelievers object that the phenomenon of the levitation of tables without a means of support is impossible because it is contrary to the law of gravity. First, we will respond that denial in and of itself is not proof. Second, if the phenomenon is real, it is somehow contrary to all known laws, which would prove one thing: the phenomenon originates from an unknown law, and those who deny the fact cannot claim to know about all of the laws of nature. We have just explained this unknown law. Nevertheless, disbelievers will not regard our explanation as sufficient, since it was provided by spirits who have shed their earthly garments instead of spirits who still wear theirs and occupy a seat. At the academy. Ugh. Hence, if the spirit of Argo had revealed this law while he was still alive, they would have all accepted it with eyes wide tight, with eyes shut tight. But if given by the exact same spirit after death, it would be pure nonsense. Why so? Because they believe that since Argo is dead, then everything he believed is dead forever. We have no intention of dissuading them. Nevertheless, since this objection might trouble certain persons, we will try to respond to them from their very own point of view. And that is, we will momentarily set aside the artificial life explanation. When one creates a vacuum, and here he goes, he's going to break down the science now. You ready? When one creates a vacuum in a bell glass by using a vacuum pump, the bell glass sticks to the base, and it is impossible to unstick the glass because of the air pressure holding it down. If air is put back into it, the bell glass is easy to unstick because the air pressure has been restored to equilibrium. And if it is left to itself, it will remain on the plate due to the law of gravity. However, if the air pressure inside the bell glass becomes greater than the air on the outside, the glass will rise in spite of gravity. If a rapid and forceful current of air is employed, the glass will remain suspended in the air without any visible means of support. Like what happens when those dolls that spin upon the sprays of a water fountain. So, why wouldn't the universal fluid, the basic element of all matter, accumulated around a table, not have the ability to increase or decrease the table's specific relative weight, just like the air does with the bell glass, or hydrogen does with balloons, without derogating from the law of gravity? Do you know about all the properties of the full power of this fluid? No. Well then, do not deny a fact simply because you cannot explain it. Mm, okay. Number 80. Let us return to the explanation of how a table moves. If a spirit can lift a table by means indicated, then it can lift anything else as well. An armchair, for example. And if it can lift an armchair, it can also lift it with a person sitting in it if it uses enough force. Thus, we have provided an explanation for the phenomenon that has been produced 100 times by Mr. Home himself and by others too. He repeated it on recent trips to London, and in order to prove to his audience that they were not victims of an optical illusion, he made a mark on the ceiling with a pencil and also allowed them to pass beneath the chair. Everyone knows that Mr. Home is a powerful physical effects medium. In this instance, he was both the efficient cause and the levitated object himself. So he's talking about a medium who actually did experiments on stage with spirits in the art of levitation to show that this isn't, you know, some weird sideshow. So now we're on the subject of the increase and decrease in the weight of objects. Okay? So again, I'm going to keep saying this. Allan Kardec is not a medium. He was a scientist and an educator, and he was part of a science academy who just so happened to stumble upon the phenomenon of spirits and mediumship and became absolutely fascinated with it all and studied it until the day he died and wrote several books on it. So when you read his books, the spirit book and the medium's book, what you're reading is a scientist's an approach to trying to understand the metaphysical world. And he does so by asking a lot of questions, and he interviews a lot of mediums to help answer those questions by having them channel these spirits so that he can speak to the spirits directly and get their answers. So a lot of these answers are in here are actually channeled messages from the mediums themselves and from these spirits. The increase and decrease in the weight of objects. Number 81. We alluded earlier to the possible increasing of an object's weight, which is a phenomenon that has, in effect, been produced by time at times, and about which there is nothing any more abnormal than the resistance of the bell glass caused by atmospheric pressure. Under the influence of certain mediums, we can see very light objects offer the same sort of resistance and then suddenly yield to a very little effort. With the bell glass experiment, the object in reality weighs no more or less than it normally does. It just seems heavier because of the outside cause acting upon it. And the same thing probably happens with the table. It continues to maintain its intrinsic weight since its mass has not been increased or decreased, but an outside force opposes its movement. The cause may be in the surrounding fluids that penetrate it, just as the bell glass cause is in the atmospheric pressure. Perform the bell glass experiment in front of an unlearned peasant, and he will not understand that the acting agent is actually the air that he cannot see. It would be very easy to persuade him that it was the devil's work. And this is why so many innocent people were killed in the ancient times. Scientists, people who did experiments, and who just average Joe most folks just couldn't understand. They were just like, what is this? Yeah, and put these guys to death. One could perhaps think that since the fluid is imponderable, then its accumulation could not increase an object's weight. Agreed. However, notice that if we have employed the word accumulation, it is to make a comparison and not to identify the fluid with the air. Yes, it may be imponderable, Nevertheless, there is nothing to prove that it is. Its essential nature is unknown to us, and we are far from knowing about all of its properties. Before knowing about the weight of air, no one would have suspected such an effect to be possible. Electricity is also classified among the imponderable fluids. Nevertheless, an object can be held down by an electrical current and will strongly resist whoever attempts to lift it. It thus appears to have become heavier, but simply because of the fact that there is no support to be seen, it would be illogical to conclude that there is none. Hence, a spirit may possess means of leverage unknown to us. Nature proves to us every day that it cannot be limited by the testimony of our senses. One remarkable phenomenon, of which we have many similar examples, could only be explained by a similar cause. It involves a young, delicate lady who, by using only 2 fingers and as easily as she would a feather, can lift a strong and healthy man along with the chair upon which he is sitting. The intermittent expression of the faculty in this type of phenomenon proves that its cause is foreign to the person who possesses it. All right, guys, this is where I stop because I only read for 1 hour and it's already 7:52. This is the opportunity to ask any questions you might have about this book, about the spirits book, about mediumship, and about spirits in general. I will leave the last 8 minutes to questions. Just to keep in mind that our next chapter is oh shoot. I was actually reading chapter 4. I'm sorry. The next chapter is chapter 5. I apologize. And it'll be on the subject of spontaneous physical manifestations of spirits. And the subcategories will be noises and rackets and disturbances, the hurling of objects across a room, the phenomenon of apparitions, and a spirit's dissertation on apportation. These are going to be the subjects for the next round, so make sure you pop in for that. And if you have any questions, let's talk about it. Did I drop my bookmark? I sure did. I sure did. Oh, the title of the book. I apologize. So this is actually the second book in the series. I'm answering a question here on TikTok. The title of this book is called The Medium's Book by Allan Kardec. It's the second book in the series. His first book is called The Spirits Book. Okay. I highly suggest you read the Spirits book first because that explains more of the metaphysical properties of spirit, the spirit world, the laws of nature, the laws of the spirit realm, why spirits become spirits, who is God, all that stuff. And then this gets into the more like physical stuff, like what is it that mediums experience and how is it that we perceive spirits? And it helps us to get through that. So both books are an absolute essential for budding psychics and budding mediums. We consider them the doctrines, if you will, of mediumship. For those of us who practice, and especially in espiritismo. Hi there, hello, hello. So if we have no questions about the books, or about spirits or about mediumship, then I will leave you guys for tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to try my best to be much more consistent. Let's see. Let's set a date. Let's set a date for the next time I read. Let's do Sunday the 22nd. How about that? Sunday the 22nd. We will continue on with chapter 5, part 2 of the Medium's book. All right, guys. I hope you have a wonderful night. You spell his name. It's Allen, and then it's Kardec. Allan Kardec. All right, guys. Have a beautiful night. Make sure you share, comment, subscribe, like, all the things, and stay awesome, everyone. This is how we grow. Bye.